Thank you for coming. It's always fun to be on the graveyard shift just after a boozy lunch and before a promise of more of the same. This is a paper with my colleagues from Davis. We've been working on this project on Brettanomyces for a couple of years, a bit longer in fact, for the conference in Padua. Tori Arvik presented the first version of this. So this is, we call it Brettanomyces 1, but it's really the second version. So Brettanomyces, this is a paper we're writing. We're going to submit to the Journal of Wine Economics very soon. We plan to outdistance Kim Anderson for both the number of papers published and the number of citations per paper, and this might be the one. And we talk about what is this thing, Brettanomyces, what are the objectives of the project, elements of the costs, and we have some work with some case study wineries and some surveys of online surveys. So Brettanomyces is a yeast that grows in wine, mostly not desired by winemakers. It's the main cause of spoilage in wine. It's a problem for especially red wine. It's particularly associated with that because the common source of infection is from oak barrels, and so it's the oak that's the source, and what it does is it converts varietal aromas and flavours. Sometimes it converts them to nothing at all, and so you just lose desirable flavours. Sometimes it converts them to undesirable flavours. There are various descriptors. Some of them are quite nasty, like vomit or horse sweat and things like that. So sometimes some people like a little bit of Brett. They think it makes the wine taste more complex, but if it continues to develop in an uncontrolled way, the metabolites, eventually different ones of us have different thresholds, eventually we don't like it. And the winemakers don't like it because it's uncontrolled. It's in the bottle, it can continue after you've sold the wine and can have undesirable consequences. So in general we don't like it. Our objectives in this project are to understand the consequences of Brett and its determinants, think about management strategies for mitigating those consequences. It's intrinsically interesting. It's also an example of a more general problem of management of quality in food manufacturing. We set out to try to estimate the total cost of Brett for California wineries and to think about different elements of those costs and how they vary among wineries depending on the type of wine they're producing, the scale of the winery and things like that. We're thinking about these elements of cost. So you can spend money preventing the problem by practicing hygiene, spending a lot of money on keeping the place clean. You can spend money on testing. You can spend money on having tested and identified either you've got the yeast growing in the wine or you've got the metabolites. You can do something to stop that process. You can filter the wine. You can treat it with chemistry, and you can also blend the wine that's got metabolites in it with other wine to reduce the problem. So you're losing money. You're spending money on all these processes to prevent, detect, treat. You can lose money because you've downgraded your wine from a high price point, you've blended it to a lower value product. That happens to some extent. You can also have problems where you have to recall the wine and dump it. We know stories about that. And you can have reputation effects. So people drink your wine, it tastes wrong, they don't know why, but they don't like it, and so your brand suffers. Okay. So it can be a collective problem. So we hear stories about the Hunter Valley in Australia where they had a widespread problem of Brettanomyces, and they did an informal collective process of giving each other a hard time until they cleaned their act up. So what have we done so far? We've got some wineries cooperating with us. They've been very, very friendly, and one of the things that attracted me into the project was these wine companies said, we're going to give you complete access to our book so we can look at every individual wine and what happened to it. They tested it. Did they find Brett? What did they do about it? Did they blend it? What were the consequences? So we have many detailed records of these wines from these wine companies, from these wineries. And then we can buttress that with an industry survey where we did an online survey to ask people how they feel about the problem. Okay. So the case studies, we have these in this winery, so they keep a log of each blend, which is a barrel lot, and as it goes through the process, the testing, the results of the testing, what they did afterwards. So we've got 23,000 something monthly observations of those. By the way, Jarrett's here, and Jarrett really understands the numbers, and Julian just fakes it, so if there's any trouble, Jarrett will help out. And then we've got another report where we report the blend report, where we report changes in blends, and part of the challenge here is to know whether, so changes in blends when Brett was present, which is not exactly the same as changes in blend because Brett was present. And so we've got this problem of attribution and saying to what extent was this caused by Brett, and when the blend changed, what was the cost in terms of the loss of value in going from a high value blend to a lower value blend. And so we have these numbers, and we've got between 2.7 and 14.6% of the total volume was blended, and that's up to 20% of, this is across the three wineries, 3.6 to 20% of barrel lots. And then we combine this information on reblending with the value of these different, each brand has an FOB price, we know that, and we can estimate the value lost because of reblending to a lower value blend. And we lost something between 0.2 and 3.4% of volume was downgraded across these ranges across the three different wine firms, and the loss of value was between 93,000 and $1 million, so between 0.1 and 1% of gross value. This is kind of conservative. This is just the cost of loss from downgrading. That's one of the elements of these costs. Fix me up if I go wrong, Jarrett. So these are our three wineries. These are wineries X, Y, and Z, or Z. Holy cow. But it's only 409. I started 402. These are quite large wineries. They produce various red wines. These are the test results where this has happened very quickly. So of the total, this is not going to happen, Julian. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. We get to the bottom and we do our survey, and we see that we survey all these people from all around the world. And the results from the surveys reinforce what we found with our winery analysis. So what I skipped over there was a very complicated process where we looked at each one of these lots and said, it was downgraded, was it associated with Brett? And then if it got downgraded, then we'll say it was because of Brett. And then what was the loss in value? And there's a whole lot of calculation and computation went into that. It's very difficult, and Jarrett can talk about it. And we came with this conservative estimate of the loss, okay, was around 1%. And then we did these surveys of industry participants, not just in California, but around the world. And we got comparable answers in terms of how do they feel about it. And there's higher value wines where it matters. It's higher value wines, red wines that are in oak for a while, so we're losing high value wines. These are wineries that we were looking at. There's typical price points of $80 to $100 a bottle for this wine that's being lost to Brett. So it's serious stuff. They hate it. Sometimes people think the quality gets better, but for the most part it doesn't. The opinion it's on the order of 1 to 5% of operating costs. It's a serious issue for them, and generally they hate the problem. Okay, so there's a wonderful paper that documents all this stuff in more than 7 minutes worth. We're still working on other things about, we're trying to get some more anecdotes which I think will enrich the story about people. We know there's horror stories of people losing whole shipments of a whole lot of wine they had to recall and just dump, and that's serious money that we haven't measured yet. I'm sorry I took so long.